Thank you for making Locked On Yankees your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms. On today's show, it's our first installment of Writer Wednesday, and our first guest is Bryan Hoch. We'll be discussing Bryan's career as a Yankees beat writer, ask questions about his writing career, and about what it's like to write 3 successful books about the Yankees. All next on Locked On Yankees. Why isn't it going? Hold on.
You are Locked On Yankees, your daily New York Yankees podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Is it Monday? Why wasn't the intro working? Hello, everyone. I'm Stacey Gotsoulias. I'm joined by my co-host, Abbey Mastracco. Abbey, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm chasing some NHL news today, but ready to sort of switch gears and talk about baseball. I've been missing baseball a lot lately.
Yeah. You know, we're in the normal dead period, but it's really dead because of what's not happening. And yeah, I miss it a lot too. I was finding myself watching highlights last night just randomly on YouTube because I miss it so much. As I said, today is Writer Wednesday. We have Bryan Hoch as a guest. We'll bring him on in a second. But before we get into all that, you can listen to us in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, Spotify, Stitcher. You can watch us on YouTube. We are inching closer and closer to 700. We're almost there. So subscribe. And if you have a smart device, tell that smart device to play podcast Locked On Yankees. So without further ado, let's bring Bryan on because we don't want him waiting backstage this whole time. There he is.
I'm here. I'm in.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I've been wanting to do this with you for a while, and I'll just let everyone know I'm the worst at asking people to do the podcast because I don't like being rejected. And that's really the worst thing that can happen. Nothing worse than someone saying no. And that's not a big deal if someone says no to doing a podcast, but I don't know. I'm always afraid to ask people. And then when they say yes, I'm so happy. So I'm very happy you're here.
That's it. I mean, if you take nothing away from this, the worst thing that anybody can ever say is no. You know, asking for an interview, a request, or anything. Okay, and then you just move on with your life. And it took me a long time to actually realize that too. I had a fear of being told no, and at the end of the day, it's not the worst thing in the world. You go talk to somebody else.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Somebody just DM'd me asking for a college kid asking for career advice, and I said, just ask if you can write. Just ask publications if you have something that you want to write, because the worst thing that's going to happen is that they say no, but they could say yes. So you have to just ask.
And so much, and I didn't mean for this to become like a kind of tutelage for college and high school kids, but one of the things that I put out there when I get requests for, how do I do what you do? Send out like send old school resumes out there, and you're going to get a lot of no's, and you're going to get a lot of people who don't respond at all. But all it takes is one person to say yes, and then your foot is in the door. So, for all the kids out there, hopefully that helps.
Yeah. It's true, though, because I started doing that when I first started blogging and, a little afraid to ask people. And then when they said yes, it was almost like, really?
Yeah.
Like that kind of response. Oh, okay. Thank you. So let's start with the beginning. Were you one of those kids who knew you wanted to write, or did that come later on?
My story is weird and goes in a lot of different directions, but as I started out, I was fortunate to come along when the internet was becoming a thing. And we're talking about like the old Wild Wild West dial-up days, AOL of the internet. That's my high school years. And so we're talking like 1996. And I was always a big, passionate baseball fan. The Mets were actually my favorite team, which is funny because I wound up covering the Yankees for now 15 years. But in 1996, I'm a high school freshman. I'm in Sloatsburg, New York. And, there's no Mets.com. There is a Yankees.com that was very primitive. There was an MLB.com that was primitive at that time. And I said, it's not fair that Met fans have nowhere to go on the internet to read about the Mets. And so if nobody else is going to do it, I'll do it. And I don't know what I was doing. I guess today you would call it a blog, but we didn't know what that was then. And I guess it kind of filled a need because it got an audience. You started getting dozens of people reading, then hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands every day. And it was like, wow, people are really kind of latching on to what I'm writing, which is crazy because I'm a high school freshman, then the sophomore, then junior. But it really kind of sharpened my focus and said, this is something I love doing. I love writing about baseball. And so I remember going back, like in fourth grade, I made like a class newspaper and printed it out on an old dot matrix printer and brought it in so the teacher could Xerox it. So I guess writing and baseball were always kind of something that I was interested in. But without the internet coming along in the late 90s, I'm just another guy. I mean, you have no outlet to do that. If I had been 5 years earlier or 5 years later, my career path probably looks a lot different.
Yeah. I'm one of those people who was at least 5 years earlier than you. And in college, even just having a website was the strangest thing. I did it for a class and, I put Yankee stuff up there, but I didn't really write stuff. I wrote on a word processor for myself. I didn't really show it to anyone at the time. I did radio stuff in college. I was the update person. So I would get the scores off the wire, print them out, and talk about them on the radio. I learned to edit things on tape and splice actual tape. And now everything's, everything I do here is digital. And it's just the change, even in those 5 years between the early 90s and even the mid to late 90s, was so significant.
Absolutely.
Changing people's career paths. So yeah, that's cool. Now, where'd you go to college?
I went to Ramapo College in New Jersey, which was actually 5 minutes away from my house. It was right across the state line. And the reason for that was I got a foot in the door. I was very lucky because in my senior year of high school, I got an email out of nowhere from Tom Keenan at the New York Mets, who contacted me, who had seen what I was doing. And this is before MLB took over the team websites. And so each team was running their web pages individually. So there was a Mets.com department at Shea Stadium. And it was, a few people who updated things and would put up the box scores and the game recaps and stuff. And so he had me come in, and I remember it was a weekend game against the Cincinnati Reds, and I went with my dad, and we wore suits and ties, even though we probably didn't have to. And he wanted to talk to me and said, we see what you're doing online, and we can't pay you anything, but if you'd like to come in for a summer internship, then we would love to have you. And so, I'll think about that for about 10 seconds. And so 1 week after high school graduation, I'm at Shea, and I got a little credential around my neck that says club official. And I totally did not belong there at that stage of my life, but it was, I felt like I had found the cheat code to get into this career here. And so I remember being in Bobby Valentine's office, and I'm lightheaded. I'm like, I can't believe they let me in here. I'm waiting for somebody to tap me on the shoulder and tell me it's time to go. But I got to be there and kind of learn on the ground about what goes on in the press box. And, I got to meet basically the entire New York press corps that year. And obviously with the Mets that year in 2000, that was a heck of a year to be around. They win the division. They go on and, play the Yankees in the World Series. So I had a front row seat for all of that. And I remember walking out of Shea after Game 5 when Bernie catches the fly ball off Piazza's bat. And I was heartbroken. I was thinking that's the end of my baseball career. And because there was no guarantee that it was going to go beyond that day. And fortunately, I felt that I had a foot in the door, and I just never wanted to let that close. So I wanted to stay somewhere where I could commute to the ballpark and hopefully freelance, do something like that. Because once I got a taste of it, I said, this is where I want to be. And so I didn't think that going away to college was necessarily going to help. I wanted to be in New York where baseball was happening. I felt like I was already kind of in it.
I took the same approach in Southern California. I mean, I grew up in Northern California, but I started school in San Diego, and then I didn't get into the San Diego State journalism program. So I thought, okay, well then this means I have to go to LA because I have to be where there's more sports, there's networks, there are bigger newspapers, there's more media, and I need to be where everything is happening. So I did go away to college, but I took sort of the same route in that I wanted to be close to opportunity.
Right. Absolutely. And, like my dream was to go to Penn State. Penn State was like my number one choice. But I feel like if I had done that and then kind of closed the door on that New York baseball chapter, who knows what I would be doing now. And so this is definitely where I wanted to be.
And before we get into our next segment, I have to talk about New Year's resolutions because it's the new year. We're 12 days in, but we're still talking about resolutions. And Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar and will help you with your resolution to get healthy. They are low in calories, low in sugar, high in net carbs, high in protein. Compare that to an actual candy bar. You can have them as much as 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. So if you're not a huge fan of working out, you can at least eat something healthy by getting a Built Bar. And there are so many good flavors to choose from. I'm constantly talking about how good mint brownie is. Abby hears me say it all the time. And I've actually had people write into me and tell me, because they listen to the show so much, that they've actually bought Built Bar themselves, tried mint brownie, and loved it. So go to Built.com, use our promo code LOCKED15. You'll get 15% off your order. Again, the promo code is LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off at Built.com. Thanks again for making Locked On Yankees your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Now that you've told me your beginnings, it explains to me why you're such a prolific writer and why you get things up so quickly, because I'm always impressed with how much stuff you write in a given week when the season's going on. Because, yeah, I've been following you for a really long time, and I'm just amazed by that, because I started blogging 11 years ago, and I, wasn't looking to get into beat writing because I was 37 at the time and I just wanted to blog, and I started doing game recaps on my own. And then people started noticing my stuff and asking me to do guest writing appearances on blogs. And then I finally got paid in 2014 to write stuff. And then when that was happening, I got to the point where I could say, oh no, I don't want to do free stuff anymore. You have to pay me to do things. And what was that like for you, going from writing for yourself and then actually getting notice and getting paid and, having people come up to you and say, oh, I read this, I read that. Like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, after 6 years of basically running a Mets blog for free, I'm sure there was remember back in the day you would get banner ads and you get paid 2 cents a click or something. I was like, wow, I'm making money off this. I just made gas money.
$8 last month.
Fill up my car. This is great. I had direct deposit for $20, and so that's definitely where I started back then. So fast forward a couple years, and I'd been hanging around press boxes long enough that MLB.com, that was a big break for me, because they were looking for freelancers who could fill in when their beat reporters needed a day off or didn't take a trip. So I was bouncing between Yankee Stadium and Shea Stadium and the old Yankee Stadium, and I would cover the Yankees one day, or Seattle Mariners are in for a 3-game series and I'm going to cover them. Or I remember being in the visiting clubhouse at Shea when Ken Griffey Jr. was in, which was cool, and just kind of getting to cover the Reds for a 3-game series. And I felt that kind of learning on the ground could not be replaced or replicated. You can't get that from a book because you're being airdropped in, and suddenly you're the Pittsburgh Pirates beat writer for a weekend, and it's I better come up with some questions to ask this, because unlike in New York, where if you're filling in on the Yankees or the Mets for a day, there's a group of 25 people around Joe Torre back in the day in the dugout. You can just stand there and listen and stick your microphone in, and you'll probably fake your way through a notebook. But when you're in the Pirates beat, and there's one other reporter there with you, and then Lloyd McClendon was the manager at the time, and he's just staring at you. And it's like, are you going to ask anything or what? After one time of being embarrassed like that, you better learn how to do your homework and come prepared. And so I really felt like that learning on the fly was very valuable for me, because you really had to learn how to do your research and come prepared every day. And I feel like you can get by in New York just filling in if you just stand there and kind of listen. But I think in a smaller market, you definitely have to be more active. And so that was a great indoctrination for me, and made a little money on the side too. That was great. I mean, MLB would pay you $150 to cover a game, and it was like, wow, that's real money. I can actually do something with that. And so I think that that was definitely a kind of a landmark moment for me, where it was like, wow, this is an actual career that I can make some money off. And but it was never about the money for me. It was about, I loved baseball and wanted to be around baseball, and just writing about it. I mean, that was my dream. If you went back in time and told 10-year-old me that I would get to go to the ballpark and they would let me in for free, that would have been enough, probably.
So now we're in some, not to use this term again because we continually use it, but unprecedented times.
Yes.
Nobody's we are a little bit back in the dugouts, but nobody's in the locker room. You have really not embraced Zoom, but you're one of the few writers who I think finds some like fun in it. There are a lot of us, me included, who complain endlessly about Zoom interviews. We miss the personal interaction, but you've seemed to take the route of, I'm just going to make the most out of it. And you've had some fun with it. You wrote the Zoom Room book. How were you able to sort of shift your mindset and say, I'm just going to embrace this?
I didn't love it. I don't love Zoom. Like, I keep saying this all the time. It's like, but if we were all in the same room recording this podcast right now, I feel like it would be a better product than it is with us being separated by, 3 computer screens and hundreds of miles. I mean, we're doing the best we can with it. It's been a kind of a learning process, but I'd never even heard of Zoom before March of 2020. I never heard of it. I didn't know what it was. And then you fast forward 4 months and it's basically our lifeline to each other. And I wrote the Bronx Zoom because I thought 2020 was just going to be the most ridiculous, bizarre season that the New York Yankees had ever seen, and really the world had ever seen. And that book is kind of just, it's a baseball book, but it's also the story of 2020, how we all kind of got through there. And there's politics in there. And, obviously the virus and everything that was going on in the world with the protests and the Black Lives Matter movement. That's all part of it. And I felt that more than any other year that I've been on the beat, politics and baseball are always separate. You always check that at the door, and whoever you voted for, I don't care. Like, I just care about what's going on in the ball game that night. But I felt like more and more, and you had players taking stands and kneeling for the anthem. You couldn't escape it. They were just inextricably linked, and you had these empty ballparks, and we were the only people allowed in. The MLB would allow 35 people in for every game, and we were all socially distanced and masked up in the ballpark. It was just the most strange thing walking into Yankee Stadium, and the lights would be on at 7:00, and the Yankees are in their pinstripes, and you look around, there's nobody there. There's the concession stands are closed. There's dust on everything. And it's like, who are we playing this game for? And you had to remember there was a TV audience at home and people who really needed that distraction. So hopefully I captured a lot of that weirdness in the book. Got to talk to a lot of people. The one thing that I wish I could have done at the time was actually do more in-person interviews, because at that time I had to rely on Zoom and telephone interviews and text messaging to get the content for that book, because after March 12 or whatever it was, that was it. We were done. And I was on the ground in spring training. I remember when they padlocked the fences and said, go home. And it was just the weirdest time, and we're still living in it. I feel like we're adapting to it. We're making the best of it, but Zoom stinks, guys. I mean, it does. I want to be
on press conferences after games. Like, you seem to be the one who's like, I don't know, maybe that's just like your outlook and your attitude in general, because you are, you're a pretty upbeat, positive guy for the most part. You have your cynical moments, as every sports writer does. I sat next to you.
No, I don't.
I've sat next to you for enough games.
Yes.
But you just maybe seem to despise it maybe a little bit less than some of the rest of them.
I will take that as a badge of honor. Maybe that's what it is. I despise it less. I will take that. I feel like you just have to have some fun with it. At some point, you take a step back and be like, this is ridiculous, what we're doing here. And we're living in a weird time, and in the grand scheme of things, maybe that's the takeaway, is that in the grand scheme of things, we're talking about baseball. And so given everything that's been happening in the world the last 2 years, if we can bring some levity or entertainment to people's lives, I feel like that's kind of what we're here for.
Yeah.
Which book has been the most challenging for you to put together?
Ooh, Baby Bombers was my first. So I would say that was kind of getting airdropped in and being like, all right, now you're going to write a book. Because writing a book for me was something that it was a broad idea. It was kind of like, I'd like to do that someday, but I'd also like to skydive someday. I don't have a set plan to do it. Like I didn't make a reservation, but and that was coming on when, Jeter had retired and the Yankees are in this transitional phase, and A-Rod was kind of showing the door, and then Aaron Judge shows up, and Luis Severino and Greg Bird and Gary Sanchez. It's like, wow, the Yankees really have something cooking here. Like they are going to be set up for a while. I hate the fact that they put on the cover the inside story of the next Yankees dynasty, because now that makes me look kind of silly here 5 years later, because in 2017, I will defend that team should have beat Houston and it should have gone on, but there were hijinks happening we didn't know about.
Yeah.
It was fun. It was a fun book to kind of get into and research how the Yankees found all these guys. I got into the scouting and the front office stuff in there. And, doing the interviews for that was a lot of fun, but it was the first time I had done a book. And so the second book, Mission 27, which I wrote with my friend Mark Feinsand, that one was a lot of fun. I talk about that like being a high school reunion, going back 10 years later and catching up with everybody in the 2009 Yankees. And that was a lot of fun because we knew the outcome already. We knew the Yankees were going to beat the Phillies. So we could kind of, I guess, sketch everything out and say, all right, this goes here, this goes here. And having somebody else, a co-writer to work with. I mean, he and I collaborated on some of the interviews, but there were some that he did on his own and some that I did on my own. And that was great to, when he would be like, hey, I got Posada. And I was like, whoa, great. All right, awesome. So we're good. And so stuff like that it's good collaborating with somebody. Bronx Zoom, I felt like was the heaviest one that I've done just because of the weight of everything that else. It is a baseball book, but there was so much else in there that I had to talk to politicians and epidemiologists to kind of get a handle so I know what I'm talking about. And that kind of pushed me out of my comfort zone a lot, which is a good thing, I think. But the one thing about 2020 and when I was writing in that book, I had the time,
I was just going to ask you about that. Yeah.
And those emails. And that was definitely the hardest period of my life because I spent 3 months living apart from my wife and kids that season. Once baseball restarted in July, we didn't know what was going on. Remember, there's no vaccines. We don't know. And we weren't even going into grocery stores at that time. And it was like, all right, I'm going to go back to Yankee Stadium now. And it was kind of like, I don't know I feel about that going home to 2 young kids. And so from July until October, whenever the Yankees were done, that was definitely a hard period. But like I said, I had the time to work on the book. So at least something good came out of it.
How do I segue into this? I have to do another.
Sorry, did I set you up on something bad?
Yeah, no, it's fine. No. Can we, I don't know, can we bet on if something's going to come out of Thursday? I'll be elusive on that. I won't go into detail about Thursday, but something's supposed to be happening on Thursday. And should we bet on what's going to happen? Well, Bet Online would like to wish you a happy new year. And as we continue our march through the football playoffs and beyond, Bet Online remains your #1 spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. It's a new year and they have a new updated desktop and mobile website. So sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to get started. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. Now, speaking of your children, Penny, I love her so much.
She's just charismatic.
Yes, for such a young person, she's just amazing. How did that all come about?
Yeah, we're fond of her too.
Oh, that's good. Good to know.
And what I said in the previous part there about something good came out of 2020 with the book. Something good came out of 2020 with that Penny's 2 cents video, because that was not supposed to be an ongoing series, but that was kind of, and that leads me into what I was talking about living separately and kind of quarantining, I guess, when I was covering home games and stuff. And so she started showing an interest in what is daddy doing? Where's daddy going? And, all right, the baseball is coming back. And so that's why daddy's going to Washington, D.C. for opening day. And she was kind of excited about that. And she said she watched some of the videos that I do, pre and post game, Twitter videos and stuff, and said, I want to do something like that. And so my wife Connie kind of set her up in front of this little silly backdrop, and Penny started talking about baseball, and then the Yankees are going to come back tonight, and Garrett Cole is going to pitch against the Nationals, and it was a cute little video, and it was just for me. And I said, this is adorable. Like, can I post this? And they said, my wife said, sure, go ahead. And I didn't expect anything to come from it. I thought it was kind of a one-off, and people loved it. And I feel like in a time that was so dark and there was just so much bad news going around, to see she was 4 years old at the time, like genuine enthusiasm, being kind of upbeat and peppy, and it's like something fun is happening. Yay. I feel like that was something that people needed to see at that point in time. And so the fans were demanding more. And so Connie made more videos. And then eventually my 2-year-old Maddie got involved with them too. And, she is a natural. Penny is really a natural on camera. And like, maybe if there's any talent agents out there, maybe we should get a commercial deal for her. It's call me, email me. I have no idea how to get involved in that world, but she definitely has a knack for it. And like, it's not something that we're pushing. She wants to do them. And so, I mean, it's been a lot of fun doing those videos. The fact that RotoWare put her face on a t-shirt just blows my mind, because I was in Yankee Stadium and I was walking on the concourse last season and somebody walked by with a Penny's 2 cents t-shirt. I was like, that's my daughter. That's my daughter on your t-shirt. And then we took a picture together, and it was just that has been wild. That has been wild. The fact, so she's a star in the making. Somebody, talent agent out there, call me, please. we can do something with that.
How different are the two sisters? Like, will they sit and like watch some baseball? Like, you said Penny. I mean, Penny's so outgoing. Is Maddie just as outgoing?
They are totally different, and that's crazy. Like, that's the one thing, and everybody says that when you have 2 kids, it's like they will be completely different from each other. And I just envisioned having a second Penny, but Maddie is totally different. Maddie is the kind of girl who, first of all, she never gets hurt. She bumps her head and is like, I'm fine. Penny's a little more princessy, I guess I could say, but Maddie is more likely to play baseball, I think, than to watch baseball. Let's put it that way. She is definitely a little more active and a little rough and tumble, but I think that's what you have to be when you're the younger sister. You can't let anybody push you around.
I love that.
Yeah, I think I was sitting next to you like the night at a game the night before Maddie was born.
Wow.
Either the night before or like 2 nights before, because the next day I was back and Mandy Bell was there, and I said, "Oh, where's Hoch?" And she said, "Connie went into labor."
Oh,
They're
man.
having another little 2 girls.
The one good thing about that was good because it was a home game. I remember
it was
when
home.
Penny was born, I was on the road, and we were on a 3-city trip, and I was in Houston, and I had a flight the next morning to St. Petersburg. The Yankees were going to go play the Rays. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to finish this road trip. And I remember I was out for barbecue. I went out with Pete Caldera and Mark Feinsand. We went out to get barbecue in Texas because,
of course,
it's Texas. What else are you going to do? And 2:00 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed, and it's like, you better get back. And I was like, how? How? But I called the airlines. They got me on a flight. They actually got me on a flight to Philadelphia. They couldn't get me into New York. And I rented a car and drove as fast as I could up the turnpike, and I made it. So I made it for Penny's birth. So, but not as wild a travel experience for Maddie. It was just I was home, and it happened.
Speaking of driving, I must discuss this. You driving to Iowa was absolutely insane.
What was I going to do?
I know, but
road trip back from Florida when you documented that whole thing on Instagram.
Yeah.
That was
right.
Hoch family vacation or Hoch family road trip.
Right.
That was great content.
That was how that started that year. 2020 was I documented the drive from from New York down to Florida for
Yeah.
spring training, not realizing that the world was going to completely change in a month. But if you look back at it now, we're going into convenience stores and we're like, oh, let's get beef jerky and like let's buy toys, and nobody's wearing masks because it's February of 2020. And who knew? But the trip to Iowa was crazy. And you know, if that was just a regular Yankees White Sox game in Chicago, I'm not driving to Illinois. Let's be honest here. Sorry, my flight got canceled. I'll get there when I can. But you know, we had talked about that Field of Dreams game for years. It got pushed back by COVID, and it was just such a cool idea. Like, I love that movie. It kind of hits me in the 80s where I grew up, and like, you know, I wanted to be there for that one. And you know, I think that was kind of the first sign that the airlines were struggling, because I had 2 flights canceled that day, and there were big storms and there were staffing issues and whatever was going on. And 11 o'clock at night, I'm at Newark Airport and they say, your flight has been canceled after like 4 hours of delays. And it's like, all right, I need to be in Iowa tomorrow. How can I get there? And then they told me, you can't. Like, we'll get you there maybe the next day. And I said, no, that's not going to work. So I called MLB as a travel agency, and they tried every kind of connecting flight or everything. I said, I'll go through anywhere. Nothing. I said, all right, is there a car? Like, okay, you can get a car. What are you going to do? I'm like, fine, I'll drive through the night.
What else do you do with a car? You drive.
Well, right. Yeah. And it's like, all right, set it up for a drop off at O'Hare and I'll figure it out. And, you know, it seemed like a good idea. And I was really pumped about it until it's pitch black and I'm approaching the Pennsylvania state line. I was like, is this a bad idea? Is this really stupid? But, you know, put on some music, got some beef jerky and some Red Bull energy drinks and stuff. And I powered through and I made it. And yeah, that was crazy. The craziest part about that was I walked in to the ballpark in Iowa. And by the way, everything smells like manure in Iowa. Like, that's the one thing you probably didn't tell on the TV. That whole ballpark smelled like cow manure, and which was an interesting scene for baseball. But I walked in and the Yankees are taking batting practice, and somehow they put my picture on the video board in left field, and like people were like, yeah. So like, I guess people were following along on Twitter and Instagram, which is just wild that I somehow, they always say you don't want to become part of the story, but for that one, it was kind of cool that I did.
Now, was Pennsylvania the longest state you've drove? Like, Pennsylvania feels like it would be, because I know when you're going south from New York to Florida, Virginia feels like it's forever. Yeah. And then going out west, Pennsylvania must feel like it never ends.
Goes on.
Pennsylvania is a big one, right? And there are some states, like I stopped to sleep in a rest area in Ohio. I caught like maybe a half-hour nap, and there are some states you're driving through, like Indiana, and it's like, why am I in Indiana? And I'm trying to like put the map in my head, and it's like, this is strange. I didn't plan on being in Indiana tonight, but here I am.
You planned on flying over Indiana.
I hope that it's something I never have to do again. I'm glad I did it. It's part of my story. Probably one of the most memorable experiences in my career. But yeah, I'll take the flight back. And people always ask, like, "Oh, did you drive back too?" No way. No way did I flew back from Chicago. I was like, wow, that was much easier.
Yeah, it wasn't a leisure thing. You didn't think to yourself, I'm going to drive to Iowa. You had to in order to get there. There's a big difference.
I would have missed the game.
Yeah.
I would have missed the game. And would that have been the end of the world? I guess not, but
That was a hell of a game, though.
It was a great game. It was
a really good game.
The fact it was a one-off, and I know that Yankee fans don't probably love that game because they lost it on the walk-off, but what a great day for baseball. Like, that was one of the best days of the year for 2021, and especially coming back from having empty ballparks in 2020.
Yeah.
That was such a fun day, and I feel like when you're going to look back at this kind of period here of baseball, that's one of the events, just like the London series that I was there for in the Yankees and Red Sox. Like, that is kind of what a cool event to be there for. And I hope baseball does more like that, where they play in these kind of one special game in places where they don't usually have Major League Baseball.
It's cool to sort of showcase the sport in a different venue. I just got back from the Winter Classic, and I've covered a couple outdoor games. You know, I've covered 2 in California where they were really warm, and then 2 weeks ago in Minnesota when it was negative 13. So
how was that?
Are
you still thawing out?
I'm pretty much thawed out. You've been in the Twins press box. That front row, the glass is vented, so it's freezing.
Yeah.
I moved during the third period. I moved to the back row, and there was like a seat that nobody was in, and it was right underneath a vent. And I was like, oh my God, finally. We were all typing in like gloves and mittens in the front row, and we were like bundled up in the front row. It was, even in the press box, it was pretty cold.
Yeah.
It was a great experience, but like, it was cool seeing like the snow on the field and everything too, just while they were skating. And the league did a great job, but it's just great to showcase a sport in a different venue, because sports increasingly, like, they all need to find ways to reach new fans. That's just that's the life cycle of sports. And having it in different venues like that, you get more fans for one game, and you might get a few who say, wow, this is really cool. I want to keep watching. This one game was so cool and so special that now you've got them hooked. So baseball should absolutely do more things like that. I don't know. Somebody had mentioned like a Bull Durham game, and yeah, the Durham Bulls do play there and everything. But like, if there's a way that maybe you could, I don't know, hit the bull and win a free steak. Aaron Judge gets a free steak. But
I think they should do a Rockford Peaches game. I think
Rockford Peaches
a league of their own would be great. Yeah. I actually drove part of my little ride back through from Iowa. I saw the highway sign that said Rockford, and I was like, I gotta go, and I gotta go find this ballpark. And I went, and I found there's still a diamond there, and there's not much else there. But MLB didn't have anything in the cornfield either. They could build that up and have an 8,000 seat stadium overnight, I feel like, and that would be cool to kind of honor the All-American Girls Baseball League. And there's so many tie-ins with the movie. Can you get Tom Hanks? Can you get Gina Davis? I think that is a no-brainer. So hopefully they can credit me for that idea, I guess.
Yeah, they could have done that this year because it's the 30th anniversary of the movie.
I know. We were going to the New York baseball writers were going to honor, obviously Omicron killed that and the lockout too, but we were going to honor a league of their own and have the cast members there. So it's a bummer. I wanted to have the Bryan Hoch and Marla Hooch picture. I really wanted that, and we're not going to get it. So, damn you, COVID.
Yeah, I'm bummed. Really. This was the first year I could actually go to the baseball writers dinner, because usually I have hockey stuff, and this year my role is different. I'm doing mostly like enterprise work, and I was actually going to be able to go this year. And now
I know. Bummer.
Nobody can go. If I can't go, nobody can go. No,
that's right.
I've heard the event is really great. So hopefully next year. Finally.
Hopefully next year. Yeah. It's been a 2-year delay, so we got to come back with a bang.
Well, Bryan, thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been great having you on.
This was fun.
Yeah. It's it was funny when you were talking about stuff and then you were talking about the driving stuff. I was like, oh yeah, I have to ask about the road trip because I need to know about that, because it was just everyone on Twitter was talking about it. They're like, I can't believe he's doing this. This is amazing.
This is going to become a thing. MLB is going to make you drive to like some far-flung locations just for the content now.
Yeah.
I'll drive anywhere. I like driving. I don't want to necessarily drive through the night and not sleep in a hotel, but I love driving. I'd love to do like a cross-country road trip one day. I'd love to drive to California. Not in one day, hopefully.
Yeah. Oh no, I've done it 3 times. I've driven cross country 3 times because I've moved all over the country.
Right.
When I was an intern at the PGA Tour, I drove to Florida from California with my dad, and then a friend of mine flew out there and drove back with me, and we made a whole baseball trip out of it. We saw a game in New Orleans, in Houston, in Austin, or Round Rock, Austin, and then in Arizona. And then I drove back from Maryland. Drove back from Maryland.
Okay. I think what we should do is MLB should set up games where I can drive to places that I want to go. I think that's probably what the league should do to connect with fans. Like, I want to see a game in the Grand Canyon. I've never been there. I'd like to go see the Grand Canyon. So
the Grand Canyon is amazing.
If we can set up a ballpark there and have the Yankees go play, I'm down to drive it.
Yeah, as long as they do it in March when it's cooler, because anytime after March, it's unbearably hot at the Grand Canyon. Okay. I went once. It's literally, you walk through a bunch of trees and it's just there, depending on what direction you're coming from. I talk a lot, was literally speechless for 10 minutes staring at it because I couldn't believe it was there. It didn't look real. And I tell everyone that. I'm like, no, you have to go to the Grand Canyon at least once in your life because it is just unbelievable. It really is. Flying over it is nothing. When you're standing
Yeah.
there and you're looking, you're like, whoa, it's never ending. It's amazing.
And now imagine if Aaron Judge and Stanton are taking BP there. Then it would really be, wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah, let's
Putting
get on
balls
that,
into the
MLB.
canyon.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, so that's it for this episode of Locked On Yankees, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Abby and I would like to remind you that you can listen to us on Apple, Google, Odyssey, Spotify, Stitcher. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. Again, we're inching closer to 700, which means we're getting even closer to 1,000, and 1,000 is actually a big deal. And when you get into your car, you can tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Bets. Make your second listen of the day Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets is hosted by your boy Q with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. One more thing, if you could be so kind, please rate the podcast and spread the word about this podcast to your fellow Yankee fans. We'd really appreciate it. So enjoy your Wednesday, and we'll talk to you all tomorrow.